Welcome back to the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Join me along with industry leaders and friends on a quest to get more people through the gym door and eating and living healthier. Join me where evidence meets empathy while rejecting fitness industry fads and extremism. Let's begin. Ava Cowan, it's an honor to have you on. We're just talking off air, and there's certain individuals who are kind of iconic, especially in the competitive space. I think of my friend Natalia Mello back when, she first followed me, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I know who Natalia Mello is. Well, I know who Ava Cowan is. And you've got quite the competitive background, even before you got into coaching. So you're an IFBB pro and a WBFF pro. You you won the champion Figure Universe, Figure America. You've been on the cover of over 20 magazines. You've been on Oxygen. You've been on Muscle Fitness, Hers, and this is a big deal. That's hard to do. But you're also an experienced coach yourself. And you had, if I'm not, certainly Dr. Lane Norton is your mentor, and you work under his brand umbrella. And I'm assuming at one point or other, he was probably your coach as well.
For about 6 years, yes.
Wow, there you go. That explains a lot too. So big honor to have you on, and we can dive right in. So here's the first fun one. When do fitness competition diets become dangerous?
Oh, it's a great question. They become dangerous when the competitor is not willing to look at what else needs to be accomplished in the year. If the only goal is the next show, deficit, that's a problem. You can get away with it for a while. You can do a lot of things for a while. Then you can't. So it's dangerous if the person is not willing to place their health first. It really has to be first, but that's really a different goal than getting on stage, because that's really not super healthy. So you have to really have a balanced perspective and be willing to go into the off season and be willing to do these different phases outside of that deficit. I think that is the recurring overarching issue, is women that want to continually compete repetitively on repeat.
What are the health risks when someone tips over to where it becomes problematic?
Just everything in your life diminishes. So there's all these different, everything, pretty much from sleep, your metabolic capacity shifts, down regulates, your thyroid is negatively impacted, your sex hormones. There's so many different systems of the body that are impacted by a deficit. That is a part of that conversation to have with the athlete about what occurs. And it becomes increasingly challenging to drop body fat. So your metabolic capacity diminishes. It becomes harder to lose weight, or preferably body fat. And that's the negative consequence, really.
This episode is brought to you by Just Bite Me Meals. I work long days and I won't compromise my client experience or sacrifice my workout, sleep, or nutrition. So I needed a quality and reliable meal prep service so I could save time on cooking and shopping and have more time for the stuff that matters. Net out the cost of groceries, and the service isn't as much as you might think, and regular impulsive food delivery apps, eating out, that costs way more anyway. I get more meal variety and less dishes to clean, and I've been referring clients to Just Bite Me Meals for a long time, and I recently started ordering myself. Food is great. The beef brisket tacos are my favorite so far, and there's a lot of menu choice. Your calories and macros are listed. The portions are great. You can order custom meals. They deliver to your door, or you can pick up from their storefront. And I'm sorry to listeners outside of Alberta, but Just Bite Me Meals is currently just in Edmonton, Calgary, Grand Prairie, and Fort McMurray. Ordering from Just Bite Me Meals made my life easier instantly. And you can get 10% off on all your orders using my code, Andrew Coates Fitness, all caps, on their website. That's Andrew Coates Fitness, all capitals, or go to the link and the code in the show notes. What about eating disorders? Is this a pathway to eating disorders, or do we have some of another phenomenon where we have maybe the person who's vulnerable to an eating disorder, who sees, well, a couple things. One is competition dieting becomes a socially acceptable way to perpetuate maybe disordered behavior, or maybe there's someone who's emotionally vulnerable, is perhaps seeking validation, thinking, well, if I get on the stage, I'll get validation, when in fact there's this fleeting moment of being judged, and perhaps judged critically, that may not be good for them. So is there a directionality you've observed?
Yeah, I mean, it becomes really obvious as a prep coach. Actually, it's really obvious in normal people in a deficit as well. There's certain behaviors and patterns that become really obvious. And it's really in line with the inability or unwillingness to bring those calories up. So they perpetually or always want to get ready. Or if they're in the deficit, then they put on some body fat, which you don't want to stay lean year round. It's not healthy. Um, Everything tanks when you stay lean. So it's the person who's resistant for any body fat to come back on at all, not really having a balanced perspective on all of it. That to me is a red flag, and I would definitely refer them out. And it's obvious immediately to me.
This episode is brought to you by Macros First. I've always struggled with nutrition tracking apps, even the slightest hassle or friction, and it breaks my habit. That changed with Macros First. When I tried it, I told my friend, the founder, Jacob, quote, this is, well, let's just call it a certain other app on steroids. It's the easiest app to use, and it has a free barcode scanner, which if you use tracking apps, you know this is a really big deal. I recommend Macros First to all my clients and friends, and even had them sponsor my 2024 conference. Here's an example feature I love: auto-calculate food portions. Let's say you've got 30 grams of protein left for the day and you're thinking, how much chicken breast do I need to hit that? In other apps, you're left guessing serving sizes, hoping you get close to your 30-gram goal. With Macros First, just tell it the target you want to hit and it tells you exactly how much to eat. No more macro Tetris. Other apps ask, how much do you eat? Macros First also lets you ask, how much should I eat? And while Macros First's premium version is incredible for any user, the basic version, which is nowhere near basic, is free to use. So you can go to either the Apple Store or Google Play to download. You referenced everyday people too. So, I mean, how much of this stuff is relevant to the everyday person who has never been interested in competition, but is kind of a perpetual diet?
I've had them, because even if they don't get on the stage, it's that same personality type to a degree where they're just hyper fixated on their physique, which it's great. It's a fantastic goal. I love it. But if the person can't come down from that goal in and of itself, there's other things going on. And there's too much emphasis on the physical component of who they are. And those conversations, usually that person doesn't stay with me too long, because if they're really driven with a skewed mindset or they're just coming from a really unhealthy place, it's going to be a sticking point with working with me, because I'm going to bring it out. We're going to have to talk about it. I'll either suggest maybe going to see a professional, but having those challenging conversations, I do that. And, it's not always the best for me as a person trying to make a living, to be quite honest. It'd be more profitable if I just kept saying, all right, let's do this show. Let's do it again, or just keep, rolling it out. But you have to have integrity in this work, honestly, or you're going to hurt people. And it's the off season that I focus on, and it's periodization of all of it. So whether you're a competitor or a normal person, the initial conversation I have is, okay. And, you can pick up on some things even in an initial intake. I'm like, all right, this is what it's going to look like. We'll do this. Like, let's say fat loss phase, or they're getting ready for a show. And then I'm like, well, then what are we going to do right after? Because that space right after the end all be all goal, then what? So we got to bring those calories up. It's the most challenging time is the time after a deficit, the time after you get off stage. Like, you have to be on it. Otherwise, it's a problem. And so I just have conversations right out of the gate so that when I bring it up down the road, when I can see, sense, it's just a little wisdom that I have going on. But when I hear certain things, I'm like, all right, but know that on the other side, we're going to reverse. I can do it conservatively. We can take our time. Those calories have to come up to predicted maintenance. And it's a non-negotiable for me. And it is a sticking point. I actually have, yeah, I won't get into that, but they're difficult conversations because you have to be able to say, listen, what you're doing and what you have done is not working. And that's for a person, like, for instance, someone who chronically undereats is much just like a person who gets ready for shows all the time. Same problem. So it's like, there's something going on. And if you're not willing to eat more food, that is looping back to that original question you had about, you know, when things are problematic, and that to me is a problem. If you're not willing to eat or bring the calories up.
What guardrails do you try to put in place for people, you know, people you coach, but people in general, to prevent some of the risks from taking hold when people are doing fat loss diets, especially if they almost like emotionally want to stay within that restricted state, or if they're competing and dieting for show?
I map out the timeline of the proposed show. Then I have that discussion of what occurs after. We need a window of transition, or we're bringing those calories back up, depending on how long the person has been dieting. Um, in the decision we make together, whether I'm going to bring those calories up quickly, or if they're more emotionally vulnerable, maybe slowly, but they still must come up. So if they're not willing to do that, it's really apparent pretty much on the first conversation, because people are so afraid of gaining body fat back. And as long as you do it mindfully, you don't have to gain a bunch of body fat back. You just bring those calories up, do it strategically. And it's really cool. And so there's the process of the person has to be coachable. They have to sort of surrender control and allow a process to unfold, because only then do you have the experience of knowing, hey, this kind of works. This is cool. You know, so what I do to put the guardrail in place is I map out the year or the time frame that they're looking to come to work with me. Because if it's just a show, I'm like, okay, but then what about right after? And so I have that conversation so they're aware, hey, we have to get into an off season, or a whatever term you want to use, you know, focusing on rebuilding your body. Some people like to use certain terms. Basically, those calories have to come up. And my job is to get the needle moving while keeping in as many calories as possible. So not moving into something super aggressive. You just really shoot yourself in the foot when you do that, because you stall out quickly.
I
It's
like the
just
emphasis. I like the emphasis on having timelines, and I think this is really applicable to the average everyday dieter. Because competition has a built-in timeline, but the person who struggles with the idea of a fat loss phase because they think that, well, I perpetually have to restrict and starve. At a certain point, they white knuckle and then they kind of emotionally rebel. Then they go, fuck this shit. And you know what happens. But I find it really helps to say to someone, listen, we're going to do this for 8 to 12 weeks. You know, it's going to be a temporary window. And then the explicit plan is we're bringing you back up to maintenance. And I think this is very relevant to competition. I think one of the reasons why we traditionally saw so much trouble is the old style. And I very much feel like Dr. Lane Norton was one of the people who kind of popularized this shift in emphasis. Was, I think a lot of coaches, they felt like their job was done when they got you up on stage, right? Whether or not you placed, that's it. And then the competitor just free for all. They're thinking about food. They're planning this binge day, which of course probably risky because you're sensationalizing sort of binge behavior. But then there were no guardrails. So there's no plan or target to get back to maintenance. So what ends up happening, they dramatically overshoot. They have no boundaries on their nutrition whatsoever. They're going into a fairly significant, probably calorie surplus. And the old belief was also that you were very anabolic during this phase when people regain weight. But we now seem to understand that that weight regain is preferentially body fat. People just soak it right up. And so what do? They overshoot. They gain a lot of body fat, which actually, if this is a person who competes regularly or the regular dieter, well, they've gained a whole bunch of body fat back. Now they're not feeling good about it. So now you have a steeper slope to actually have to diet back down again. And for the everyday person, you're perpetuating, cycles of yo-yo dieting. And I think that giving someone a clear target to know, hey, this is the timeline, this is the plan, and having them go to maintenance is the biggest lever to just prevent that cycle of weight regain. And I think it probably structurally looks very similar with the boundaries for the competitor and the boundaries for the everyday person. Any additional thoughts there?
It really is similar, because it's really like, for instance, I have everything I have everything written out. So I actually have, like, for instance, if you have a certain body fat, if you're at a certain body fat level, I have a game plan. Like, it's discussing with the person how long we're going to do a maintenance or a build. I keep them at maintenance or a range, and then I discuss a transition, and then another cut. So depending on how much body fat you have, you want to go through certain cycles and not just, hammer it and grind down forever because of the compensatory response, because of the adaptations. It's just become super, super hard. So that is where you want those cycles. So depending on how much body fat you have, that's how I'm able to sort of lay it all out, because it's not going to happen by, I think there's a lot of misconceptions, but I have people that come to me that are like, I'll just do something really aggressive. I want to compete. I'm like, oh, it just doesn't work that way. I mean, I understand the concept of yo-yo dieting and doing stuff super aggressive. Your body only can go so far. So you have to come up for air. And depending on how much body fat you have, me as a coach, I guide, I let them know, all right, we have to do this for this long, and map it all out. Plus, I take into account their history, because what were you doing before you came to me? Have you just been dieting for the last 5 years and then you come to me because you want to diet again? Well, we're going to have a conversation. And so I may not be the most popular amongst competitors, but I care a lot. It matters to me more than anything else, to get blood work done, to see a snapshot of what is occurring when you and I meet. And then through the process, getting the blood work done again, because we can't really guess and you don't want to. So it's just upregulating everything, being conscious about it, taking responsibility as the athlete and as the coach, giving the time frame. All right, let's come up for air. I'll give you an example. The 16-week diet and lifestyle remodel challenge. My client won the grand prize. It was the fat loss category. And she was coachable, was one thing, but she had a really good, great quality. She was coachable, but she's a person that went in to do this challenge. She lost quite a bit, and she wants to continue. However, we're doing the reverse now. So we'll go into another phase so she can get down to exactly where she wants to be, but she's mindful and cognizant and aware enough to go, hey, it can get there on the second phase, because it gets to be a grind. You just dieting, coming up for air, going to maintenance, and then revisiting a deficit again down the road is what we're going to do. And so she's not a competitor, but it's really the same concept.
So you have a very lengthy history of competition. What were the personally positive experiences that you got from it, but also what were some of the negatives and the dark sides that you might caution people to be at least alert to if they want to even start, or if they're considering maybe that's going to be an ongoing lifestyle thing?
I'm going to get a sip of water. The best day of my life, 2005 NPC Southern States, first competition. I won the figure overall. There's no way for me to articulate what that did for me on every single level of existence. Yes, it was a nod. It was like, you're enough. And I think that leads into some of the reason I did the competition to begin with. Sometimes it's unhealed patterns or things that are going on inside often lead people to the stage. It did for me, and it was a great tool. I loved it, and I got to show myself that I was enough. That was the recurring, probably, little person problem that I grew up with. And so that's the lesson I took from it. And I was enough. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot that can be worked out, on the stage, so to speak. But I just did things that everyone said you can't do. And I'm like, no, I'm doing this. And I didn't listen to anyone at all. I knew it was for me. It was life or death. Like, I had to do it. It moved me. Like, that show, I was in Florida, there was hurricanes, but I learned really fast about bringing food with you and being super prepared. Electricity's out. I didn't miss any training. I'm doing push-ups on the stairs. There's no electricity. I go to the gym to get ready and to prepare my food, and just that whole journey of showing yourself how far are you willing to go to do what you said you were going to do. When you're tired, you're hungry, you just want to die. I mean, you're so tired that your soul's tired. And I don't know if you ever get the rest, even after you go to sleep. It's a lot of work. And I just loved it because I knew I could do whatever I wanted to, irrespective of the opinions of other people. And that was a really important part of my journey. And so that is what I pulled from it. And I would say conversely, there's things, you have to be really outside of the opinion because it's a subjective sport. People are not going to like you or they're going to like you. And you can't really sway in the wind too much because of that. So you have to prepare to win and you have to prepare to lose and be completely okay with it anyway, no matter what. You just don't want to put too much emotional weight into it because it'll destroy you. It will, So
What about, so you document that moment where you're on stage and you've won. What about after that? The come down off of that. What does that feel like?
I just kept going. So that was just I didn't actually come down. I just knew that I got the nod. So I knew it was what I was supposed to do. So I got to work. And I'm like, all right, let's roll this out. I mapped out shows. I also did venture into a different way of prepping because I did learn on the old school bodybuilding, don't add salt to the food, called the water company to see if there's sodium in the water. I mean, I did what I was told and I didn't question it, but I knew I couldn't do it long term. And that's when I went and looked up on Body Space and found Lane.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that actually leads right into the question about the old beliefs and the stuff that you would have been very active in the industry at the time. And again, Lane is one of the people who I think started challenging things. I can't remember the name of the book because I don't have a physical copy. I have Fat Loss Forever, which I love, but his competition prep guide book, that's great. And I think that one went against the grain at the time. Yeah, exactly right. You've got it. So what were some of the old beliefs? And these may be just exclusive to competition, or even they may be like mainstream dieting myths that you were exposed to and you may have discarded along the way. What's changed?
I would say the number one would be some of the supplementation. So like branched chain aminos, I don't really do that anymore, or BCAAs, or no, the anabolic window, I would say would be the thing that I don't do anymore. And I was sitting on the bathroom floor in the gym because I didn't want to miss the anabolic window. I wasn't going to be late on my meals. And I was really adamant. I mean, it is an all or nothing kind of sport. For me, it was, and I'd be sitting on the curb and I just didn't miss. And so because I didn't want to lose any muscle and it was so important to me, but that is the one thing I would say that I didn't take with me, is that having, that you have to eat this, 25% of your carbs before, 25% after, but it did really work. It's just not as pressing, meaning like what's more important is the overall 24 hours, what you're doing and the averages for that day and the week. But I think the anabolic window was the thing that I let go of. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And I suppose there's an argument because I remember when I would read bodybuilding magazines when I first started getting serious about lifting was in my early 20s. I mean, I've been lifting since I was a teenager in my basement. The anabolic window was a big thing, right? We thought that had both, as you said, a very big impact on whether or not you built muscle, but also the timing of your meals, the frequent meals was really critical for keeping lean. And boy, did I ever subscribe to that a long time ago. Now, when you're talking about the heights of competition, I mean, it's not that meal timing means nothing, but it actually might be a slight differentiator when you're nailing your macros, when you're nailing your daily protein intake. So was there anything within that you still think, okay, I still think that timing matters at that level?
Yeah, it matters for a variety of reasons. So your schedule, having a cadence and a rhythm, and the meal timing is important for a variety of reasons. One of which is, appetite, hunger regulation. It does assist or can. And I just think your body does get used to it, knowing when you're going to eat. And there's not too much variation in the day, typically speaking, on people's, what they're doing all day. Their schedules are pretty set. So meal times usually are pretty set. And you get hungry in certain times, and it's just maybe is more of your preference. But I'm personally, when someone's competing, I do still say, all right, listen, let's put this many carbs and this percentage of protein. Protein really spread throughout the day, but like that pre and post workout, I do the timing. That's super important. No
I
doubt
believe
about
so.
it.
I believe at that level too. I think it does matter. And it's certainly if all things being equal with daily carb and protein intake, especially like carbs around workouts. And I've always practiced these things. And I'm still the person, I do the post-workout shake. I do. And I know it's not necessarily all that scientific, but there's another dimension. It's a structure, and you alluded to this, but the structure and the habit during a day reduces friction in decision making, which simply may make nutrition adherence easier for people. And I don't think we can discount that. And I think someone's energy levels, I've noticed if I play with meals and the timing of meals, it can actually have, if I miss, a second meal kind of in the late morning, I find it interferes with my physical energy to do my work, right? So the idea of
Absolutely.
like, I've never practiced fasting. I certainly think that the hype is overblown, and I am of the belief based on the evidence, as I understand it, that yeah, I think people can fast if they find their energy levels are good. I do not think there's any benefits outside of just it's what it does with calorie intake for you and your body composition goals. There are people that swear by it, but the idea of like fasting for extended windows to me, I would just feel lightheaded and tired, and it would not work for me.
Yeah, fasting, it's just never, I've done it for spiritual reasons or for reasons outside of body composition. Um, Not often, but I wanted to do it for the experience.
Mm.
But no, fasting, I've just never, it's really, it is a calories in, calories out situation. And I think the benefit of fasting is you're bringing in less calories overall. Going back to that whole 24-hour window I was talking about, that's what's occurring there.
And I'm good with the idea of it using it as a tool if it works for someone, because as you said, it helps them get their calories down and they like it. I'm also a little leery whenever we get someone who might be drawn to a restrictive and potentially disordered eating thinking, and therefore we have a socially acceptable way to actually like act out an eating disorder. Are there people that are drawn to fitness competitions for the wrong reasons?
Depends on how wrong. I mean, like what layer of, hey, you really need to get professional help are we discussing? Because that's nuanced. There's definitely behaviors that are just really obvious to me, and it's really the chronic dieter. But yeah, because you're so hyper focused on your physical body and you're doing some crazy things that is acceptable because you're preparing for a show. But that same person, I think, would be obvious to pick out because they're continually dieting for the show, not really putting on any muscle, which it is a bodybuilding show. Like that should be the premise is building your body and then reducing the body fat. But ideally, if someone were to come to me, I want to put them right in a build if they're at a normal body fat range, because we kind of have to build it up because we're going to bring it back down and you want to have something there when we do that. But yeah, when someone's super lean all the time, they're not doing it or attempting it. That isn't necessarily true. It could be a genetic consideration. So I don't want to make a blanket statement. There would be other things that would be obvious to me, like not doing a free meal. Like if I'm like, listen, let's go you need some food. Sometimes I throw that in the mix. And if they're resistant to that or don't do refeeds that I set up, I'm like, why would they not take a refeed? Because it's all calculated in. So those little behaviors that might pass by, I notice because there's fear behind the decision for my athlete or client. And I always address the fear component. But yeah, I went kind of sideways there, but
No, this is
yeah,
great. So you mentioned earlier about referring people out. So obviously, if someone's coming in presenting with eating disorders, that's a big red flag.
it's a big red flag. They probably wouldn't be as directed to me because we do have a team of coaches. So they would be directed to someone who, is a registered dietitian or works
Mhm.
in that space. But they might come to me because they see that I work with competitors. And I have actually had people, honestly, that I was contemplating reaching out to one of the other coaches on the team because of the non-compliance or didn't want to do the reverse or the off season, I call it, and or bringing the calories back up. And I'm like, no, we really have to. And so after educating, sending articles, showing research as to why you have to do this for overall health, that person needs to get referred out, in my opinion. So
Are there lessons within the competition prep world? Because a component of it, you've mentioned building, but there's also the dieting to get leaner, that are valuable lessons for the everyday person in their own fat loss journeys? Tactics, etc.
Yeah, the planning and preparation of your meals, and to the degree that you don't miss on your diet. That to me is gold. The competitors just learn how to not mess up. So anyone can take those strategies and bring them into their life and get a great food bag and plan ahead of time and pre-track, putting it in your tracker so you're not retroactively calculating what you ate because you're going to miss. So there's like these skill sets and things that are non-negotiable for competitors that the normal person, if you implement it, you can look great. And it's really the planning ahead of the meals, in my opinion.
You mentioned food bags, so you made me think about those, like, what, 6-pack meal bags? I haven't heard of those in quite a while. I never had one. Did you have one of those?
I did I ever have one? It might have been given to me, like,
Mm.
I did. Yes, I did get those. Yep. I think I had a backpack and a couple of them, but the one that I always refer people to is one that goes in the overhead. It can go around, on international flights. It fits in that overhead barely, but in a pinch, it can be used as a refrigerator. I mean, it's like completely ready to go. And of course, I've had situations where I've had to not have a refrigerator, and it works. So it's just getting the tools and committing to doing it.
I'm guessing that the idea of the 6-pack meal was like, hey, you have to have these smaller, more frequent meals. And I'm guessing that as we've gotten away from that belief, it's probably why we don't see those cooler bags as much anymore, because there's less emphasis on the frequency of the meals. I think now, I mean, I tend to still be someone who eats more frequently just because it helps me eat the amount of calories I need as someone who is, well, I walk around between 240 and 250 pounds for many years. But even more, I'm comfortable biasing towards larger meal portions and less frequent. But that took years of evolution. Okay. Let's see. More questions for you. How do you navigate helping the person who claims they want to gain muscle and needs to, but struggles to eat enough to grow?
That's a recurring theme. I deal with it every day, and it's a lot of conversations. It's getting, articles, research. It's educating the person, and then highlighting the fact that, listen, what you've been doing or the under eating isn't getting you to your end goal. So why don't we go into a different direction? Signal to your body, hey, I'm not starving to death. I don't have to survive here, and hold on, to adipose tissue and not. It's just, I think, just educating someone, and you got to show they have to have some faith in the process, and you have to sort of go, all right, what I've been doing forever isn't working. Let me just do this thing. And if you can relinquish control and are willing to go through a process, it's like, I mean, it's really cool. So I think people come in with whatever issues have occurred in their life. When we get into a coaching dynamic, those things come front and center immediately. Then there's a choice for them. Are they willing to either be uncomfortable? Are they open to address these things? And if it's, kind of borderline, I do refer people and, ask, hey, is there someone that you can speak to, a professional, so that I'm guiding that process? Because I love working with people who are scene therapists or physical therapists. And it's like having a team of people collaborating together, because not every one person does everything, or they shouldn't. They're not the expert in it. So if a person is willing to learn and is open to that, I can suggest, hey, let's, what about this person? Let's go talk to this person. And you can really work through some things while in all these different phases. And to be quite honest, those things that come front and center, the person has to address, because my boundaries are really solid. I've done a lot of inner work. And so it's such a wonderful opportunity to level up on every level, not just your body. It's the inner work that you are presenting out there. And I even try to express that to my athletes about what they're bringing on the stage. That's a whole other show.
Does the rational argument and evidence work on someone who's got a very emotionally rooted belief system about why they do what they do?
It's so great when I'm very close to home with this. I won't say more than that, but
That's okay.
Sometimes they just keep not wanting to, they just, and you have to be able to allow the space for them to show up to be compliant. And then if they're not, so you have to allow someone to make their errors, to make their free will decisions. And then they have an experience based on those things. You can guide someone all you want, but if they're not really ready, it's not going to happen. So it's having difficult conversations, and then the person has to go, maybe I'm doing it wrong. Maybe I have to do this process. And so if someone is stuck in their ways, it's more challenging.
I love asking questions. That's my just good coaching, I think, is asking questions. I like bringing to people's attention the potential that there are probably stories, narratives, post-rationalizations. I speak about this frequently, that they may not be factual. And it's not to say to someone, what you believe is wrong, here are the facts, right? Sometimes they need education, absolutely. But sometimes I just need to crack the window open just a little bit. So that way they start to recognize the fact that what I believe here, it may no longer be serving me. It might be like protecting my identity, protecting my ego. But if we crack that door open a little bit and then allow for a safe place, trusting place to let that conversation marinate, then we can sometimes get, and by asking a lot of questions, I find if people will arrive at their own conclusions and be willing to, hey, I'm going to let go of some of these beliefs. But the hard part is when those beliefs are somehow protecting them from something, and they may be hurting them. So there's no easy answer here, but at least I like bringing that to the forefront. But that's a little bit off track of this conversation. So another thing I really wanted to ask you is, what's going on when someone hits a fat loss plateau?
I've been dieting too long. It's that phase when they're just, what's happening is there's an adaptation. It's a compensatory response, and it becomes increasingly difficult to drop body fat when you've been doing it for a while. Your body just wants to, live, preserve life. And if it feels that is going to be a problem, it just makes it more challenging to sort of let go of adipose tissue and relinquish, these stores of fat, because that is your life. It can be life or death if you get too lean. So what happens is the body just stops responding. And, that's when those choice points come up, because do you continue to drop? And do you are you going to still just keep grinding, or are you willing to take a step back and go, well, is it like this? And, take a look at the big picture and be willing to make a different decision and go in the other direction. Otherwise it doesn't just automatically get better. You have to heal yourself and let your body know, hey, I'm safe. It's okay. I'm bringing food in. You got to live there a while, not doing it just to race to get back into the deficit.
That makes a lot of sense. I think I'll present sort of three things, because I think these are worth diving into. And I just had Dr. Spencer Nadolsky on, so we talked a little bit about this. One of the things is as someone reduces their calories, and as someone loses body mass, their base metabolic rate goes down. So what was a deficit now can actually become maintenance. Two, there are going to be a lot of physiological, psychological mechanisms that's actually going to upregulate hunger, which actually makes it much more challenging to continue to eat in a lower calorie deficit. But I think the third thing is someone actually adherent? Because we have some stuff going on there, and I think that gets into tracking. So how do you tell if someone is adherent or not when they swear, hey, I'm eating this many calories? Because we know there's built-in error there.
Every time you ask these questions, I can visually imagine an exact scenario rather recently, where, you just have to really establish, hey, you got to tell me the truth, and you got to track everything. And I'm not going to judge you, but we're going to go there. And I think the component of not judging you and not doing that shaming, that whole thing, but you got to be honest. And so if you're not, I know immediately, but I also allow that to play out, because I want them to come to the conclusion of, hey, I've got to tell the truth. When the scale's not moving and the calories are low, and they should be, and you're expending a lot of energy, and when they're just repeatedly nothing's occurring, they're grabbing things. It's just that wisdom piece. And that's tough because I have to ask the questions, but it is those motivational interviewing questions that whenever there is a sticking point or a challenge, that is how I navigate that so that they can come to their own conclusion. And even the person who is not probably tracking everything, they've got to get honest with themselves and with me. Because I mean, how many times can you lie on a check-in?
Are they So I guess there's a couple things here. Are they lying to you? Are they lying to themselves? And how much this is actually just this built-in error because, measuring calories. I mean, if we had and I can never say this word right, a bomb calorimeter, I'm sure I fucked that up. Uh, that's like the way that you could theoretically in a closed environment measure, the calorie value of food and what it burns. But the way that we eat food is not necessarily the same as that way we metabolize it. There's differences in our metabolisms. There is the thermic effect of food. There is, are the calorie values on something actually accurate? Certainly restaurant food. So I always try to build in the understanding and get the client to understand there's a built-in error rate here. Okay. But I also know you're right, is there's a lot of people who, there's measuring error. Like, talk to me about the different forms of error that get built into this stuff.
Now, mindless, and I didn't know about this term till recently, but like I've heard the term BLTs, bite, licks, taste,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not tracked. And I'm like, and when I heard that, I'm like, what do you mean it's not tracked? You mean you're eating something and you're tracking everything else, but you're just choosing not to track that? Okay. Um, you know, so that can be illuminating. But those are the places that I think, particularly people that have children or you're making snacks and the snack crackers, that's a tough one. So you have to be really, really in and determined not to have some Cheez-Its or whatever, you're packing up for lunch. That to me is it's important to have that conversation because I think people sometimes just aren't honest, to be quite honest. There's that,
Fair.
degree of error in, the tracking apps and that 20% variability and not accounting, the net carbs. And so there's all these tricks and things on the labels. And so it's not completely accurate. So there's that component, but are you tracking every single thing? And at night, are you grabbing some, cashews in the kitchen when you walk through?
I
Those
do
kinds
that.
of,
I do
yeah,
that.
that's why I
um,
remove those.
Fair. What about the tricky things to measure? So your peanut butter is that's the, oh God, what's the word I'm looking for? That's the celebrated weird. The fitness competitors have this weird relation with peanut butter. It's almost like this holy thing. But when people are trying to track things like, let's say mayonnaise, other sauces, peanut butter, because these things are so calorie dense, how easy is it for people to be off by what they're tracking because they've got a heaping spoonful versus the actual, like, quote, tablespoon?
Yeah, it's really heartbreaking when you see how much peanut butter you get for the calories that it allots. It's just like disheartening. But I do advise and say, hey, put everything on the scale. If you put your toast, but you got to measure it. Everything has to be measured because you don't want to be stuck because you're inaccurately measuring something. That's living in purgatory. So those bites and those things or inaccurate tracking or whatever you're doing, you're just going to keep yourself at the exact same spot. And sometimes that's the lesson because you have to be willing to, I don't know, go to the next level in terms of determination or, just deciding you're going to do this because sometimes that can wane and then that can open the door. But you have to be very, very cognizant of why you're doing this to begin with. And you have to keep reminding yourself because you will get hungry and then having strategies in place so that you have something you can do as opposed to ruining your diet. So it's putting systems in place for yourself.
This opens up something, and I like thinking about this. I like challenging people. I believe, due to what we see as normal in our modern environment about alcohol consumption, eating tasty food, food we love, and this may come off a little harsh, but I want people to sort of it's a challenging a narrative. I think people believe that they're entitled to be able to both eat all the tasty food they want to eat when they want to eat it, but also to remain at the level of leanness, the physique that they want, and remain metabolically healthy. And I think we kind of have to realize that that's not reality for most people. We definitely live in an obesogenic environment. I talked about this recently with Dr. Spencer Adulski. If anybody really wants to go down into this stuff, there's a lot of talk there, the role of genetics in the environment. But I do like sometimes getting people to realize it's like you can't have it all, and it may feel unfair. And this is also tricky with women because our society has serving sizes that are one size fits all. You go to a restaurant, you buy anything, it's one size fits all. There's rarely a women's and a men's menu or products. And if they're women's only, they would put the pink tax on it. They would charge a premium, just the way companies do all the shit with other products, which is dubious and dirty anyway. But for women who are on average smaller, on average have less muscle mass, on average have lower base metabolic rates, right? There are obviously outliers. Don't get mad at me for that, stating the obvious. So if men across society are progressively gaining body fat and becoming obese and metabolically unhealthy, what's that doing to women if women are theoretically consuming the same portion sizes, the same amount of alcohol in some sort of context, right? In theory, and I know that's not everybody, but in theory, that just means that you can accumulate body fat faster. And and this was tricky because you hear anytime someone brings up this mythical 1,200 calorie number, and there's outrage. And I believe that most women, especially if they're fairly active and they, have put on a bit of muscle, 1,200 calories is probably too low for the overwhelming majority. But there may be women who are not sufficiently active enough, who are quite small, who 1,200 calories might theoretically be your maintenance calorie level. Now, can you modulate your lifestyle in order to increase that number? You absolutely can with activity to a degree. But the outrage, it's like, and the person who swears they're tracking and eating 1,200 calories, when in fact, the error, all the things going on, they're probably eating 2,200 calories, but they feel entitled to consume this larger amount of calories. I don't necessarily have an answer here, but it's like bringing this to the forefront to realize that in order to maintain your body mass and your activity level and your metabolic health, you simply aren't entitled to eat all the things you think you want to eat. And that's a tough pill to swallow.
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's the person that, even in the context of being a competitor, they want balance. That's not what we're doing. So, or they're resistant to a calorie drop. No, if you're not dropping, that means we're not in a deficit. So we've got to do something, else. There is a sense of entitlement, and I've come across it quite a bit. And here's the thing: some people do have to eat that little. I mean, if you're a little person and if you're sedentary or whatever, or you've been dieting a long time, and that's where we're at right now. Yeah, that does have to happen sometimes. And so you have to really embrace cognitive restraint. It's a part of it. You're going to be hungry. It's another lesson to work through. What kind of hunger? Are you going to die? I mean, are you going to die? It's really putting things into perspective. And sometimes just a shift in your perspective, like having the conversation of you're not really entitled. I mean, if you want to do this thing and if you want to get to an end result, that's that discipline component that's what it takes. And so that's what a competitor would have over someone on a regular fat loss journey, but it's open and available to everyone. You just have to make a decision and stick to the thing you said you were going to do. And no, you're really not entitled. If you're not dropping and things aren't happening, you got to make an adjustment. And why be miserable about the adjustment? I really work on the mental component around all of this, because complaining and the whole thing and the whole looking at everything through a negative lens, that has to be addressed immediately. With me, it's important.
And that's probably not easy. This has been wonderful, illuminating. I hope everybody will go and follow you. I think the easiest touch point is probably Instagram at Ava Cowan. You're one of those people that was lucky enough to get your name and didn't have to slap the word fit or fitness on it like I did. But I always love lamenting that point. Are there any other resources you would like to direct people to?
Finish. Well, I mean, I do work for Team BioLane, and so there are resources in terms of lots of great stuff. There's reps, there's the workout builder. So there's a little portal on biolane.com. If you want to go look at articles, look up about some of the things we've touched upon here, you can definitely find it there. And I have, a whole list of resources, but heck, even Lane's books, this competition prep book, the Fat Loss Forever, for
Oh, hold
someone
up.
who,
For
yeah, I mean,
anybody
it's
who's watching, there's Fat Loss Forever. Yep. Complete. What's
I
it called
mean,
again? The
there's
complete. Hold it up.
contest prep guide. I mean, if you want the answers to
Yeah.
the test and all the science behind it, that's what's there. And then your job is to take it and execute. And if you need help with that, you can find me on the Instagram.
Wonderful. And then the starting point, your media is great. I pulled a lot of the questions from some of the stuff you've been posting recently. It was nice to do a bit of a deeper dive into this. So everybody go check out what Ava is doing. Guys, thank you again so much for tuning in. I appreciate you. One of those little calls to action, maybe, just maybe, if you haven't yet given me a review, I would love some more reviews. That would go a long way to support me, my sponsors. Check out my sponsors. And stay tuned for the next episode, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I put a ton of work into bringing you industry-leading guests. I also put a ton of work into my coaching programs. Registration is now open for my Forever Strength 13-week online women's strength program. It starts Monday, June 30th, but secure your spot today. I cap registration at 125 members. This round offers between 2 and 4 full body strength workouts. It's flexible for you because summers get busy and you don't want to drop your strength training completely until fall. You can choose between a gym program or a home dumbbell and TRX version. There are tons of great programs out there, but here's what sets mine apart. While my program is structured so you can function independently, I'm here when you need help. For form feedback, coaching, support, and I reply promptly, not just in 24 hours. I've heard horror stories about coaches and programs that charge high ticket prices only to have the coach take days to respond, if they even do at all. More and more coaches are trying to automate, systemize, and scale themselves out of interacting with their clients or even being a real human. You'd get better support from an app. Instead, try my support and program this summer, all for just $160 Canadian, and you can save 10% on that using the code LIFTFREE, all one word, LIFTFREE. Register at foreverstrength.ca or use a link in the show notes or message me directly on Instagram. I'll hook you up. If you're a coach, you're welcome to. We often put our own training last, and it's nice to have a plan and support when you need it. And you're welcome to join to experience how I run my program. Registration closes Monday, July 7th.